Let's gotta find a way to turn the
I keep accepting. You just talk and ignore the bits.
Okay, so first of all, I'll explain what Liquidity Book is, how it's different from previous other protocols. We can also go into like what is an automated market maker, like because I don't think there's some basic understanding of what like an automated market maker is, what it does, and what you as a liquidity provider actually are, which is a market maker. So what is Liquidity Book? Well, and how is it different from traditional AMMs such as Joe V1? So you as a user, when you deposit tokens into a liquidity pool, think that it's almost like a savings product. It's a way to accrue passive income with your tokens that you put it in, and that's not necessarily the case. Like an AMM or an automated market maker it's a market making product that is automated, right? It executes the market making for you, and Liquidity Book is an automated market maker. So as a user, when you're putting tokens into a liquidity pool, either in Liquidity Book, Joe V1 or Uniswap, you're depositing tokens into a market making product. And the automated part is because there's an algorithm that essentially uses your tokens that you've given it to make or to meet the trade executions of people that are swapping tokens on the decentralized exchange. So when you're in a liquidity pool, you are actually a market maker. You may just not realize that.
Yeah. Market makers are the ones that make the books liquid. So when you want to buy a security on a stock exchange, for example, you need to have bid and ask. And normally there's not people behind that, but there's professional market maker with delegated liquidity. They make sure that buyers and sellers can meet the demand of the market, but they do not actively influence the market without express mandate to do so. Well, automated market makers are just pieces of software that make the market so that they define the active price without then the need of an order book.
Liquidity pool. My point is you are becoming a market maker. And as a market maker, you enter a liquidity pool with your assets, with your tokens, and your strategy is executed for you. So that is either traditional Joe V1 would be a 50-50 ratio of tokens. That's your market making strategy. You provide 50 split, 2 tokens, and you hope that the fees accrued over time provide a profit for you. With Liquidity Book, you can pretty much have any type of strategy you want. It's that kind of flexible. You can go with a 50-50, well, you can enter with a 50-50 split of tokens. You can enter with 99 to 1% split of tokens. You can even provide just one side of the market, and the varying ways you can distribute your liquidity as well. It doesn't have to be a uniform structure, but we'll get onto that shortly.
When someone provides liquidity, they provide liquidity on a 50-50 split at the moment of depositing their tokens, but they deposit in a XY equals K curve, which means that whichever direction token A and token B will go, you'll still withdraw 50-50% of these tokens. This generates permanent loss based on this specific curve. With Liquidity Book, we are going to provide liquidity in a specific and tight range. So concentrated liquidity protocol allows to provide liquidity in a way more efficient spectrum, as you don't deploy liquidity from 0 to infinity as a curve, but you only deploy liquidity in the range, or with Liquidity Book also in the specific bins. But let's make it simple. So in the range that you select, making your liquidity way more efficient in 2 digits multipliers, usually in regards to fees that you collect.
Yeah, we can use Liquidity Book for is one, yield farming. You're providing tokens, you collect trading fees, right? This is probably what 90% of people, or 95% of people are doing. This is just a vehicle for you to accrue trading fees. You can deploy different strategies. We'll talk about that shortly. But essentially, you can deposit tokens into a liquidity pool and Liquidity Book, and you can collect trading fees for doing that. So as Davide was just alluding to, this is different from a traditional X times Y equals K AMM, where you provide a fixed ratio of 50-50 and the AMM balances between those tokens. When you deposit liquidity into Liquidity Book, your liquidity is fixed in the price range that you select or you decide when you choose different liquidity shapes, or if you customize your price range. And just to repeat myself, we'll talk about these shapes very shortly. So your liquidity is fixed; it does not move, and that's why you must manage and monitor your position when you deposit it into Liquidity Book. So this is also how I use Liquidity Book. I use Liquidity Book to essentially DCA in or out of a token. Okay, I think this is not necessarily a wide use, but it is hugely beneficial to do this if you are, this is quite situational, because essentially you can deposit one token into a liquidity book pool. So I'll use AVAX USDC as an example.
Here we go.
So I can DCA in or out of a token using Liquidity Book. And how I would do that is I would basically deposit one. I should have done that first, actually. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to pull this out and then actually just do that to show it. So basically, you can deposit one token into the pool. And for example, if AVAX USDC, if I deposit AVAX into this pool, I can basically DCA out of AVAX, assuming that the price moves in favor of my position. My AVAX that I've deposited will be converted into USDC. And that basically means I would have swapped my AVAX into USDC, stablecoin. I would have done that with no fees, no swap fees, because it's just been transitioned in the liquidity pool. It's just been converted by price change. And I also would have earned yield for doing that via trading fees. I've done this a number of times with tokens as well. So you can avoid swapping by just providing one side of the market. Let me just add that in now. So I put 2 AVAX into the AVAX USDC liquidity pool. My price range down here, I just pick something random. So 17.5, that's where it starts. So the price of AVAX, 17.5, and I've ranged that up to basically 18.2. So if the price of AVAX starts to hit 17.5 and it keeps going up all the way to 18.2, I would have DCA'd my 2 AVAX into USDC. So that means I basically swapped 2 AVAX for no swap fee at all, and I would have gained some yield for doing that as well. Let's talk about some shapes. Let's talk about what we have on the UI here in terms of the shapes, and then how you can like utilize some of the additional customization options to change these up, and we'll also talk about why you'd want to deploy each one of these. I guess with Spot, this is basically your go-to shape for full customization of what and how you want to kind of deploy your strategy. So you'll notice with curve, bid, ask, and wide, you don't have the customization options here, but with Spot you do. So Spot is the one where you can play around with a lot more. And so I think David was just explaining, you can go really concentrated. So I can use the UI here to help me do that. So I can deploy over 5 bins. I can go up to 20, and I can be very one-sided. I can try and keep it even. So using the sliders to help me position like more of a 50-50 ratio of AVAX and USDC. I can basically go over a wide amount of bins, but with one side of the market. So here, this would all be pretty much USDC. Then I can flip that as well. And I could go heavy AVAX with a bit USDC, or I can just go one side. That's USDC. Sorry, I've inverted it. My bad. Doesn't matter. Or I can just provide one side of the token, like the example we just talked about. If you wanted to TCA into or out of one of the markets, you can do that. So that's what you can do with the price range. And also with bin radius, this is a new customization option. And this allows you to be a bit more specific with the range that you want to deploy. So when you're playing around with the range, you've got these sliders here. You can choose how many bins you want to deploy your assets over. With bin radius, this is a new feature. I think this will probably make more sense as well when we have native limit orders, but I can just simply with bin radius, I can set my price to provide liquidity at. So let's just say 20. So when AVAX is $20, this is basically, I can provide liquidity at $20, and then I'll choose how many bins I want my liquidity to cover from. So this would be from $20, and I'll add in, I don't know, 30 bins from that, and it kind of sets a 30 bin radius around my desired price here.
So may I ask the people that are raising their hand if they can write inside the chat their questions? So I'll try, Blue and me will try to answer them directly.
Yeah, write in the chat and Davide will fire a question at me.
Thanks.
So what I also want to talk about with Spot is it's not just customization in terms of how you distribute your liquidity, in terms of the amount of bins. You can always remember that you can change the ratio of tokens. It's never 50, it never has to be 50-50. You can deploy, 10%, 90% one side of the tokens, and there'll be different reasons for doing that. But maybe I can set up something. So what I was doing recently with some LP was I was like stable heavy, and I was essentially, let me just deploy. Okay, so what I've done here is I've deployed, this is more of maybe an advanced strategy, but just to give you an idea of what you can do with Spot. So I've deployed, so this is the active, let me talk for the UI. So you see two colors, one which is USDC, and then the other which is AVAX. And the bin, these are all split by bins, which are specific price points in this liquidity pool. So this middle, this two color bar is basically the active bin. That is the currently traded price of AVAX, 17.38. This active bin will always have two tokens in it. So you can see my split here on the UI. I've got 0.18 AVAX and then 58 cents. That's my liquidity in this active bin.
A nerd detail on the active bin, the percentage people get between token A and B is actually the same percentage of the active bin for everyone else. So you're adding equal percentage of the current liquidity in the active bin, adding just your liquidity precisely as it is.
Yeah. So the specific strategy that I've got here is, and this is something I've run recently, I've gone in heavy with a stablecoin USDC, and I've only put in a small percentage of AVAX. And my reasons here are, I'm expecting AVAX to potentially gradually rise. Maybe I've looked at some TA, maybe I'm bullish on macro environment. And in short, my investment strategy, my thesis here is I think AVAX will continue to go up a bit. And so I'm deploying some of my stables here to essentially just have a bit more of a lower risk sort of yield farming strategy. I know AVAX isn't going to just rocket up consistently day after day. Sometimes AVAX will also have a slight retrace. And my liquidity strategy here with this shape is to basically accrue trading fees with most of my stables that I've deployed into it on any sort of retrace that I see in that happens to AVAX. And what we may see over a number of weeks or so is price gradually moves up, but there are some retraces and my stables will pick up those trading fees. So I'll be earning AVAX and USDC, and I'll probably chase the price with my liquidity. So maybe I'll withdraw it and reposition it a number of times as the trend of AVAX goes up. But essentially what I'm doing here is I've just got a pot of stables and I'm just farming some trading fees whenever AVAX has a slight retracement in price.
I would like to add some point, and I'll also have people have a mental exercise now on this. So the first, before you remove liquidity, looking at the shape. So what do you all think that is the attitude of a liquidity provider providing liquidity in this shape? Are you bullish or bearish? I'm giving a few seconds to have everyone saying bullish or bearish. And now let's make a scenario. You are the liquidity provider here, and you deploy the liquidity in this exact shape. You'll go to sleep. This type of shape will be a better fit for someone which is actually short-term bearish, mid-term neutral, potentially, as this position exposes yourself. If you do not touch this position exposes yourself to earning fees on the downside. So you are assuming or betting on downwards volatility from 17.3 to 16.5, something like this. If you expect to withdraw the exact same amount, excluding any permanent loss, you will want to withdraw your liquidity when price is back around 17.3, or when your fees anyway value so much that doesn't matter. So if you actually want to DCA downwards without limit orders as of today, so without what here happens is that you will end up, if there is a downwards direction, all in AVAX, and potentially AVAX going down is going to expose to impermanent loss of the AVAX token in proportion to where they are in price. If it goes below 16.5, you are exposed to the AVAX impermanent loss of the entire movement. Let me say it again in short words. If you want to deploy like this and then leave for days, your intention should be the price will stay in this range for a long time. If you expect to buy a lot of AVAX because you think that AVAX will go up, you want first to deploy like this. When AVAX goes down, so you have DCA down, you should then withdraw liquidity, rebalance it in another way, or just keep the AVAX, and then you have DCA down. Because if price instead goes down and then back up, you expose yourself only to the fees mostly on the downside of the movement. Hopefully this wasn't confusing, but to explain that exposure towards a direction without rebalancing or without removing liquidity when you have reached your objective means just exposure that could be entirely reversed. So it's fees farming until you execute the strategies you expected. So let's talk a bit more about strategies later on.
So Curve started off its life as normal. You may remember it from the UI. You would have seen normal. And I think it probably wasn't the best name for it because Curve is more of a high risk type of shape to adopt in a liquidity pool. This is nice, isn't it? Curve has been slightly adjusted. It's no longer about 30 bins. It's well, that's 11 there. So plus or 5 from the active bin. Curve is a high risk shape. It is concentrated. It does not have a uniform distribution to liquidity, so it's not the same amount of liquidity distributed over a number of bins. It has a peak, and the majority of the liquidity is in 5 bins. So this is a very concentrated, high-risk shape. So in the market, such as AVAX USDC, I would not be wanting to personally deploy this shape here because the price of AVAX is too volatile for me to feel comfortable managing this position, over this narrow range. So as soon as the price of AVAX moves out of 17.2 or 17.5, I'm then suffering. I'm not earning any trading fees, and then 2, I would have been fully converted into USDC or AVAX, and I need to rebalance.
So this is a weekend.
Yeah, this specific shape was actually designed to pretty much be rebalanced every roughly an hour. So it's a maximum fee earner, but it's really high risk, and if you're using it in a liquidity pool that is volatile, and they pretty much nearly all are unless they're stable, you need to really carefully manage and monitor this position to make sure you're accruing fees and you're still within range. Let me remove that. So I'll talk about bid ask.
And also where you position it. In that case, it's more like a volatile within the range, and mostly also a range useful when you know that the market is less liquid around the volatility. So if you know that everyone is providing liquidity in the middle of the range and you expect volatility up and down, but overall neutral, you'll want to use this shape as you'll be earning more volatilities than the ones just betting on the median. You'll earn all more fees when the price then moves in a volatile manner.
Yeah, so very situational. Remember, you don't have to deploy 50-50 of a token. I can put in I can go heavy on one token and almost nothing on another. Okay, cool. So basically what I've done here is I put in free AVAX and essentially nothing on USDC. So this is kind of like a ladder strategy, which is almost in a way, with my AVAX here, I'm expecting some price to increase for AVAX. And as it increases, my AVAX will convert into USDC. This is a way to also, in this case, DCA out of AVAX. It's a good way to kind of stagger up your liquidity. So the further the price moves up for AVAX, the more I'm selling into USDC. So my strategy here is, I want to sell this one token. I'm going to use Liquidity Book here, and I'm going to DCA out of it gradually. So the more the price goes up, the more I'm selling. So this is kind of a unique way to enter or exit a token, because obviously before we have native limit orders built in, which should just be a few weeks from now, which will help you automate this type of strategy, completely. Just wanted to kind of show that specific shape in that specific way. I think we've got one more to talk about now, which is wired. And wired is probably my go-to shape, if I'm honest. I use this the most. I use this if I want to sleep. I will use this basically for some of the LPs I'm in. Here we go. That deploy quite quickly. So wide gives you a preset coverage of bins. Again, you can deploy any ratio of tokens here. I've pretty much gone for a 50-50 split. It gives you that preset coverage and the price range. So for AVAX USDC, it's up to 18.3 down to 16.5 from that middle price of 17.3. So it's got a good coverage there. And barring any extreme volatility or big volatility, my liquidity will likely remain in range as I sleep comfortably, knowing that I'm not, hopefully not going to be suffering from a concentrated position that goes out of range. So with wide, I'm going to collect a reasonably comfortable amount of volatility that may happen within this LP. And it's a uniform approach as well. So I'm minimizing any concentration that curve or bid ask may give me, depending on what I'm deploying. Davide, do you want to talk? You want to discuss anything about wide? Davide?
Good, I was muted.
No.
I made a terrible joke. Yes. So wide is the best strategy for the users indeed that would like to earn a good amount of fees, but do not want to care too much about wide movements. So as you deployed wide, we haven't talked too much about fees up to this point, but fees are accrued for within a position only by the active bin. So in order for you to gain any fee, you will have to have one bin being the active bin, and that's the bin that accrues the fees. All other bins do not. So in proportion with wide, you're exposing yourself to lower fees, but a wider range. If you expect price to move little and you want to rebalance frequently, you are exposing with a tighter range, you expose yourself to higher impermanent loss, but higher fees at the same time. With a wider range, you lower impermanent loss, also lower the fees you get within a tight range, but it's a longer term strategies, which doesn't make you have to wonder about directions too much outside of clear directional movements that might anyway be large enough then to eat all your beans. So it's a win-win in the long term, counting fees and impermanent loss exposure. Would you like to talk a bit about impermanent loss, Blue?
There's two, definitely running out of time. There's two more. I just want to make sure that people are aware as well. They may be listening in or watching this back. You can deploy liquidity over a larger range using spot. So wide is not the largest range. You can go even wider. And thanks to spot, by selecting this, you can pretty much define any price range that you want to put liquidity over. So if you want an even wider range than wide, you can go ultra wide. For AVAX USDC, I've selected, I've entered 15 per AVAX, so it's $15 per AVAX, and then I've entered 25 here, that's the max range. So I'm going to deploy liquidity over that $10 price range, and that will go over just over 250 bins. And I'd have to use the batch deployment feature for that. So I'd add liquidity one by one here. That'll take 5 transactions. That's quite a big range that I'm covering. But if you want a passive approach, you can really go wide, using spots. It's still more capital efficient than a X times Y equals K AMM. That puts liquidity over 0 to infinity. So it's still more capital efficient. And you can really be comfortable with that type of price range on AVAX or any other liquidity pool that you want to deposit liquidity into.
Can we add more liquidity when we are already deployed, Blue?
Yes, we can. So, let's say my shape that I've got here, which is, covering that 16.5 to 18.2. I won't go into the details, but essentially because, the bins, liquidity in these bins, it's all fungible. Once I can deposit one shape, so I can go with a, I guess, relatively concentrated approach here with wide. But then I really want to lower my risk level. I can then place, let me do like 100 instead. That's probably
do 50. Well, but yeah, let's do
there's not much difference from wide. So I can use some of my liquidity to deposit into wide, or maybe I'd go with more of a concentrated approach. Like maybe I actually put in curve, or maybe I put in spot over 10 bins in the middle. But then I can also then add in another position, which lowers that risk level that I've got So I can go in. Oh God, that's come out funny. There's one side I put in. But basically what I've just done here is I put in more liquidity over a wide range. I selected 100 bins. You can't see that now, but I selected an additional 100 bins, put in more liquidity. And you can see that it's just been added to my existing position. I didn't do the range right, so that's why it's gone like that. But you know, I'm now covering my liquidity over something like 130 odd bins. So this really makes me comfortable.
On top?
Sorry?
It's on a curve maybe on top?
That's
Or you're out of it? Are you out of money already?
I don't have much money. Give more money to the marketing. What it here?
So here we're building multiple shapes, and this is part of the vertical staking properties of Liquidity Book. To the contrary of other protocols, with Liquidity Book, you can actually add more liquidity, remove liquidity from specific bins, create unique shapes. So now we have a wonderful distribution where we have added a curve distribution of tokens in a specific range and a wider curve. It's not that we have now 5 NFTs or multiple individual tokens for each deployment. The token positions that we had for the bin 17.4, for example, just got more liquidity in it. We don't have to manage these positions individually. If you want to remove all liquidity on one side, for example, you can do it now in one transaction, even though we deployed it on multiple transactions with multiple liquidity shapes.
And maybe I can demo removing part of my liquidity. We talk about that. I'm conscious of time, so let's also talk about. I do want to talk about impermanent loss, but I also want to talk about some tips. That one of the most popular questions I get asked is, what do I do if my position is fully converted into one token? Right. So say I've added liquidity into AVAX USDC. I wake up one day, it's all AVAX or it's all USDC. The price has moved. My liquidity is essentially out of range. I'm not earning fees anymore. I've only got one token now. So what are the options?
YOLO.
Sorry?
YOLO.
YOLO. So the best tip I have is do not pull your liquidity out and swap 50% of it for the other token. Okay, there are some reasons for that. Like if you're basically, the swap fees will eat away at your profitability. They'll essentially it's expensive to do that basically. So some strategies, what some people will do is they may want to withdraw their liquidity and they may want to swap a smaller amount, such as 10 or 20%, and then redeplosit that liquidity back in with that approx ratio over the current active price range. Or what you can do, what I mainly do is I will pull all of my tokens out. So just say I've got all AVAX, I'll pull them all out and I'll reposition them closer to the active range, wherever it is. And I may want to extend the range at which those Apex tokens go over. Or depending on what my strategy is, if I just want to convert some AVAX quickly back into USDC, I may opt for a more concentrated approach. And Davidate, what in this case, what would you typically do? Because those are two of the key options that.
Can you repeat the examples, please?
Sorry.
Can you repeat the case, please?
Yeah. So you've woken up and your LP is all one token. What would you do from that point?
So let's try to be a bit more advanced in this case, since that's what I do. First of all, you will want to understand what happened to your position. So are you priced out because the market is bullish and you are at a lower range, and we are not anymore, AVAX is not anymore $15, it's 17, we are overall bullish. We will want to redeploy. We will want to withdraw the tokens, redeploy it in the new range, and earn fees until a further movement happens. To the contrary, if we will expect price to come down, we have two options. Price to come back to the previous value where we had deployed, we have two options. One is, as we mentioned, we could do nothing and wait for price to come back, but this will not expose us to liquidity. You could deploy to a wider range that includes the current price, maybe a bit beyond the current price, till back down to where you were before or to where you think the price will go. The concept about redeployment is also having to make an assumption in, does it matter to me as liquidity provider if where the price is or no? If the answer is no, just redeploy wherever the price is in a tight range, because you are betting on fees, that fees will beat any impermanent loss. So if price will move 1% up or 1% down, but the APR tells you that you will earn, that you have that the price, that actually the LP earn 2 or 3%, then 3% is better regardless of the directional movement. If instead you think that there is a new direction, you might want to reconsider where to deploy the token, for example, using spot or using wide. As with volatility, you need to widen your range. If any one of you ever use, for example, Bollinger Bands are a volatility estimator. When price goes sideways, bands gets narrower. So you should concentrate liquidity. When volatility is high, you should go wider and try to expose yourself more to a wider price movement. Not financial advice.
Yeah, this whole workshop, not financial advice. Definitely not from me anyway. I am but a novice. I see we've got Sir More Money here from More Money. Thanks for joining. He said rebalance closer to the active bin. So we also had a question actually from a listener. He's 94% ETH and the remainder USDC. What's his mistake? What does he do now? Like, hopefully that was clear.
So the percentage might make people feel a bit off. So let's specify that when you deploy close to the active bin, you might end up quickly with a narrow range. You might end up quickly only in one token. You haven't lost money. If the price moves a few bins on one direction, actually you just end up mostly or entirely in one token. But that's just because since price moved, the bin to the right or to the left have been emptied from one token, so only the other token is now the reserve, and you have a different proportion. With Liquidity Book, you'll never end up 50-50 outside of timing it perfectly when the price is still there. But what happens is that you are exposing yourself to the movement and the direction in proportion of your deployment and the active bin. So let's assume that we deploy this position, we move all the way up to 18.27. We have all USDC in that case, because all the AVAX we have deployed have been swapped within the bins into USDC. So we cannot get more than what the final value will be. In this case, the deposit balance with Blue is like $74. I'm making a random number, but it will end up probably at $77, $80 when AVAX is at 18.2, and that's it. You cannot earn more when you're all in USDC from the deposit balance. When you withdraw, you will only withdraw that amount. And every movement AVAX will have above 18.27, it's what's it theoretically called impermanent loss, as AVAX could move to 100, but you'll still have your $80 of this position and have lost your exposure to what your original deployment would have been if it stayed 50-50 without.
So yeah, so in short, like if you're all of one token, the two options are you remove that liquidity and you can either redeposit close to the active bin, or you can choose to swap some tokens and reposition over the active bin, so you can immediately start accruing trading fees from that. Like my main tip here is like don't pull all of your liquidity out and then go to swap something like 50% of that, because you're going to eat a big swap fee. You may also find that the reserves in the liquidity book pool are very low, so you could also create some level of price impact, or eat some larger slippage as you go over more bins to extract what reserves are left. So like generally those would be your two main options. Cool. I also want to mention something about fees as well. So you see here I've got 20 cents. I'm not going to claim that, because how much gas is that going to cost? It's going to cost me 60 cents in gas to claim. So that doesn't make sense to claim. So, a basic tip here is claim fees when, it makes sense relative to the gas. Hopefully most of you are accruing more fees to kind of, not typically have to think about gas too much, but common sense claim fees when the gas isn't a significant percentage of the fees that you're accruing. With liquidity, you don't have to remove everything at once. You can remove one side of the market, so I can remove all of my AVAX or USDC, or when I go to remove both, I can choose to remove a section of liquidity instead of removing everything at once. And sometimes I've done this. I'll wait till the shape showing up. It's gonna happen any second now. There we go. All right. So sometimes I've removed a section of my liquidity on one side of the market. If all of a sudden, I'm expecting a further retrace from AVAX, and I've decided to remove some of my USDC next to the active bin because I'm expecting a retrace, and maybe I want to concentrate that over, and to minimize, to maximize my gains for this move. I've removed part of that because I'm expecting a stronger retrace, and maybe I want to add that liquidity I've removed on top of the back end of my liquidity shape that I've got. So I've removed a bunch of USDC. I'm going to add that pretty much on top of the liquidity I've got on the far range. And this is a type of strategy that, if you've really got strong conviction and you're really expecting that retrace, this is a small kind of additional play, or this is a flexibility that you have with Liquidity Book. You can remove a section of liquidity and choose to concentrate that in a certain area. So you can see in the shape here, I've lumped all my USDC in this price range. Maybe I'm a TA expert and I think this is where there's going to be strong support on this retrace. So I'm executing a really bespoke strategy here, utilizing the flexibility of being able to remove some liquidity and placing it in different bins, such as here. Not financial advice, do your own research, of course. Have we had any questions come in? No.
A few questions were more related to what to do in case you are not balanced appropriately. And I would say that most of the time, if you don't have an active expectation on where the price should be, and it's just not 50-50 right now, you should just decide what to do. If you want to chase and rebalance frequently, then you want more fees, and that's it. So it's also a matter of how strong the volume of a pair is to accrue more fees than a movement. That is also relevant because fees have to compensate the impermanent loss you're exposing you towards if you go narrow. And if not, you are worried because you are not 50-50, maybe wider is a better strategy than in that case if you do not know what to do in case the pools is not correctly balanced.
Yeah.
So just to make this answer more simple is, if you do not know what to expect out of a position and the market is very volatile, go wider is better. If you have an expectation and you want to execute it, rebalance towards your expectations, either in fees or in direction.
Yeah, and if you basically, you just want to earn some trading fees and you don't really have any conviction in or specific strategy that you want to execute, you can, of course, go for the ultra wide position using spot. You can place that over a wide range and you can pretty much sit back and collect some fees.